in a machine that rotates the vial at a specific rate. Then a light turns on and shines an image at the vial. And after about 30 seconds, you take the resin and dump it out.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the finished product here. It's a little robot. Only took, how long did this take? Like 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
Yeah.
And almost like magic, there's a perfect 3D printed piece. In this case, it's a little robot. So you can make anything you can make with a standard 3D printer, but because the printer doesn't rely on layers or nozzles or supports, you can also do things that normal 3D printers can't do. For example, you can do something called overprinting, where you form a 3D structure over an already existing structure, like putting a screwdriver handle on this bit. And even cooler than this is you can print things microscopically small. These are tiny structures that are almost invisible to the naked eye. They were 3D printed in the same way. No layers, but the whole volume printed all at once. Today I'm going to show you the amazing process that turns a 2D flat image of light into a 3D structure. To understand how this works, first we have to get a CT scan. In a CT scan, a patient enters a big machine. This machine then shoots X-rays through your body. On the opposite end of every X-ray source is a detector that detects the intensity of the X-rays after it's passed through the body. This data is then used to construct a 2D slice of your body. So by shining light rays, in this case X-rays, at different angles, the machine reconstructs a 2D image or a slice. These slices can then be added together to reconstruct a total 3D image of the inside of your body. The method to get an image based on shining light at different angles is called tomographic reconstruction. For example, let's say that you're imaging this pi symbol here using these light rays and measuring how their intensity changes as it goes through the pi symbol. The red graph shows the data you would receive at each angle for each ray of light. So even though you're only getting one-dimensional data, this data contains information about depth based on its intensity. You know, if it's less intense, then it went through more material. So if you add all these graphs together, you get how the intensity changes at all the angles. But now here's the key. Let's say now you have some photo paper that turns white when light hits it. The more light that hits it, the whiter it turns. So now you can just reverse the process and shine rays of light that mimic the attenuation graphs you got earlier at every angle. When you do this, you end up with the original picture of the pi symbol. So by varying the intensity of light at different angles, we can create complex images. For example, let's say I have a beam of light shining on this surface. This tape will represent my beam of light. Then when I spin it, it will make a disc. For us right now, the reason we can see a disc is because this is the part that has enough light for us to see it. Outside of here, even though the tape is still there, it's only there periodically, so it's not as much light as the center. So this is where it would hit a critical value for it to make a disc. If I have two beams of light separated by a gap, then I can make a disc with a hole in it. So this makes like a washer shape. So I can make simple geometries without even varying the intensity of the beams, but just by rotating it. But if you're able to rotate the light source and vary the brightness as you rotate it, then you can make complex geometries like the pi symbol here. So we know that light can be used to make these 2D images, but how do we make them into a 3D structure? Well, to make a 2D image, we're shining a linear array of lights, a one-dimensional array of lights. So if we shine a 2D array of lights, we should be able to make a 3D image. But the only problem is we need a three-dimensional photo paper. And that's where this stuff comes into play. This is a special resin that hardens when it's exposed to a certain amount of light. Below a certain intensity of light, nothing happens. But once you hit a critical value, then it hardens. So these printers have a projector that shines a 2D array of light at the resin as it spins. It's literally just a projector projecting a special image onto the resin. The image it projects kind of looks like a ghostly image of the final 3D structure. The projected image rotates along with the vial. The image that it projects is created by performing tomographic reconstruction of all the 2D slices of the 3D file. And although I just explained how it's working, it still seems like magic when a final 3D structure emerges from the resin. So the file is still built on 2D slices of the 3D model, but all the slices are printed at the same time. The entire volume is formed at once. Now, if you have a resin printer, some of this information may have struck a chord with you. You may have noticed that I talked about the resin as if it were some new invention. But regular resin printers also make 3D prints that are formed when light reacts with the resin to harden it. But it does it layer by layer by moving the piece right against the surface, which shines a light that makes that layer harden. So could we use regular resin to make a 3D object using volumetric printing? Well, let's try it and see if it works. Let's see if I can make a sphere by rotating a vial of resin in front of my UV flashlight. If I have a circular beam of light, that should in the end make a spherical shape. But before we continue, another application of light that I want to talk about is detection. That's why I want to thank the sponsor of today's camera. The system is also a physically for app. Everything includes real link on the edges. Okay, it's been about 3 minutes. Let's see what this looks like. Oh, it's hot. So it looks like it just made a ring around the outside. See if that's what it actually is. Oh man. Look at that. So that's what it made. So I'm pretty sure my light was too big here. It took up basically the width of the whole vial. I need the light to be smaller than the vial. So I'm gonna use a violet laser. The resin cures at ultraviolet wavelengths, but I think that it'll get into the violet wavelengths as well, so this violet laser should still work. See if a sphere shows up right in the center now.
How you doing? Listen, I'm working.
Okay, so the same thing happened. Even though the light was only focused on the center, it was dragging along the edges, so it made this ring again. So why did this happen? How can their printer make a sphere when they do this, but mine just makes a ring around the edge? Well, in talking with Taylor Waddell, one of the scientists working at Berkeley, he told me it's all in the resin. Regular resin, like the ones in SLA printers, have additives in them that block the wavelengths of light that make them react or harden. This is done on purpose because you only want a very thin layer of resin to react when your plate comes down and the light turns on at the bottom. So you can see how the resin absorbs the light when I put it on this white plastic here. You can see how bright the violet laser is on here, but when I put it on the transparent resin, it doesn't reach the bottom. So it's getting absorbed by the resin. I'm gonna harden this top piece here. Another reason this didn't work is because the resin reacts at any light level hitting it. So even if the inhibitors weren't in the resin, it would have just turned into a solid block, because ultimately light's hitting everywhere in the resin a little bit. So in order for this volumetric printing to work, you need the resin to reach a threshold value before it reacts. So in the special resin used in these printers, light will react with the molecules in the resin, and if these reactive species bump into each other, it'll start forming chains. But oxygen in the resin also reacts with the activated species and can deactivate it. So the only way you can get the polymer to actually form is if there's enough light so that it reacts faster than the oxygen can deplete it. So if you have a little light, nothing happens. But once you hit a critical value, then it will harden. So this gives you the ability to have very fine edges and shapes where the light hits just above the critical value to give you a solid. And everywhere else you don't get a solid. In fact, you can even reuse the unhardened resin afterwards. These printers are honestly so cool. I hope to see them become more accessible to the general public in the near future, especially because you can do certain things with these printers that can't be done with traditional printers. So thanks to the team at Berkeley for letting me showcase their cool technology. They're actually trying to make these printers more available to the public by making them open source. So if you want to check it out, I'll put a link to their Discord in the description. And thanks for watching another episode of the Action Lab. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.
What if you could throw out all your charts, click erase on all those colorful drawings, never worry about a trend, financial statement, or technical analysis ever again? What if you could ignore all of it and still have the opportunity to turn dirt cheap options contracts into what could be massive paydays? Like this 100% winner on Lulu, with options that only cost 68 cents to enter, or a 134% payout on Qubit, starting with just 73 cents per contract. and even a 156% return on Oklo, starting with just $1.58 a pop. But if you click the link below, I will show you exactly how I did it, plus my live real money.
This is the world's largest 3D metal printer. It was built by Relativity Space, a startup that aims to print an entire rocket, including fuel tanks and rocket engines, in just 60 days.
I'm like looking inside a 3D printed rocket that is actually going to go to space. This giant hunk of metal. It's unbelievable.
This video is sponsored by Omaze, offering you the chance to win a trip to space. More about that at the end of the show.
There's a lot of UV coming off the welds. You can film it, but don't look directly at it.
You get sunburned fast, so it's like you're suiting up to go in a volcano.
All right, we're gonna go in to the 3D printer and see how it works.
All right, so yep, just hold this up, don't look at it. We are in the printer.
I can see it over there.
If we walk around here, we can get up close. So that's the wire melting and the print head moving around. So that's the plasma discharge, and it's hard to tell, but it's doing things at every couple milliseconds. It's actually changing the electric waveform, which is how it's controlling the deposition so well.
Do you know the temperature of it? Like, is it just above melt temp?
It's just above melting for aluminum. Yeah, probably a few hundred degrees above.
The melting point of aluminum is 660 degrees Celsius, so the whole body of the rocket is effectively melted together one tiny bit at a time.
All the raw metal for the whole rocket that's printed is this. It's we kind of joke it's like Charlotte's Web, like a spider silk, but this is an aluminum alloy that's on a wire spool. We actually print about 10 inches a second. So this wire is really going super fast, and then the combination of lasers and plasma arc discharge are working to melt both of them together at the same time.
So where does the wire come out?
So it's right there,
Uh-huh.
and then the electric arc discharge happens right at the tip of the wire too.
This is a camera?
Yeah, that's a camera.
But why would you want to 3D print a rocket? Is it just because we can?
It's funny to me that you had this experience with 3D printing where you're like, oh, 3D printing is clearly the future. Whereas I feel like a lot of people's experience with 3D printers, as mine has been, it's like incredibly frustrating. I feel like 3D printing is that thing that seems like it should be great, and yet whenever I try it, I don't get a result that I'm happy with.
Yeah, I know. I can tell you, we had plenty of experiences the first couple of years where we ended up with a pile of metal and it didn't work.
But there are actually good reasons to 3D print a rocket. A rocket has 4 major systems: payload, guidance, structural, and propulsion. The bulk of the rocket is made up of the propulsion system, including the propellant tanks and the rocket engines. Cryogenic fuel and oxidizer are pumped through an injector into the combustion chamber where they react, releasing an enormous amount of heat. This causes the exhaust gases to expand, exiting the rocket nozzle at high velocity. The faster this exit velocity and the higher the mass flow rate, the more thrust that can be generated. So rockets are huge, complex engineering projects, which up to this point have largely been manufactured using traditional techniques. That means before you can build the rocket, you first have to build the tools to build the rocket. For example, to build NASA's next huge rocket, the Space Launch System, or SLS, they first needed to construct the Vertical Assembly Center, or VAC. This is a 170-foot tall tool for welding together the domes, rings, and barrel sections of the rocket's fuel tanks.
They built that like an aerospace thing, and they've had to spin up all these custom tooling designs and validate that those work before it actually starts building the rocket. And they've finally got one being assembled on the pad after 11 years of development.
In contrast, Relativity Space, the company, is just 5.5 years old, and they plan to launch their first rocket this year.
I see this as a like old engineering style versus Silicon Valley style of build something, figure out what's wrong with it, and build another thing that fixes those, right? The difference is I've always done that with software. These guys are doing it with aerospace hardware.
So this is the actual rocket tank structure of what we're going to be launching to orbit at the end of this year. So this actual thing is launching to space.
That will go to space.
This will go to space, and it's by far the largest 3D printed product really of any type ever made that's gonna fly. I think maybe of any type in the world.
But it still looks 3D printed, like you can still see the layers.
Yeah,
right?
you can still see the layers. It only adds an extra 5 to 10% of the mass with the roughness. When you actually cross-section the material and look at the machine parts of it, it looks like normal metal. Like actually at this end, this is printed as well. We just machine it afterwards. So it looks like normal metal in the joint sections.
Does the surface roughness cause any aerodynamic problems?
No, none at all. Yeah, it's actually the exact same aerodynamically. This whole thing, we simulate the print before printing, because if you just printed the 3D file and said press print, you would end up with a printer that's warped and like material falling all over the place. It wouldn't actually work. So we've invented software that reverse warps the whole part before printing it. So the robots are actually doing this really wobbly, weird shape, but then it is actually perfectly straight within a human hair across the entire length. As it cools,
the warpy thing turns into the...
And we simulate all of that. So it's a big computational solver that simulates it. And there's many other problems we've had to solve to actually get printing a rocket to work. But it's all these little pieces over the last couple of years. And we've really started to hit some breakthroughs, which is also why now you see a whole rocket. Yeah, you can step up here actually if you want. Yeah.
Hello. I'm like looking inside a 3D printed rocket that is actually going to go to space.
Yes.
This giant hunk of metal. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's like rings inside.
Those are printed in stiffeners, and so those help prevent the rocket from buckling and crumpling. So if you had a Coke can and didn't pop the tab, if you try to step on it, it's almost impossible because there's pressure inside that keeps it from buckling. But then when you pop the tab, there's no pressure and you can crunch it super easy. It's not hard at all. So rockets are the same. The 50 psi of pressure, which is about the same as a car tire, keeps it inflated and keeps it from crumpling. But then those stiffeners also help keep it rigid. Yeah, so believe it or not, a rocket tank is thinner versus its diameter than a Coke can. So when you look at a Coke can, how big it is and then how thin it is, a rocket tank is actually thinner than that. So yeah, it's pretty light. It has to be very light.
Sure.
I would say it's like having another producer in the room that knows exactly what your song is. This is co-producer, the fastest way to find samples that fit your track. It listens to your track and pulls in samples that fit the rhythm, harmony, and key automatically. No more scrolling and no more random loops that don't match the vibe. You can ask it to find specific sounds or let it listen to your track and suggest something that could be cool. Plus, you get unlimited access to every sound, so no credits, no pay per download, just drag and drop. Simple. You can audition everything inside your DAW. Stay in flow, stay creating. And the sounds made by actual musicians. Analog processed, crazy good. If your sample workflow feels stuck, this is gonna be the fix. Try co-producer free and let your track pick the sounds.
Over 2 decades ago, I started a small financial research firm for my kitchen table. That company grew to become America's largest and most successful independent financial research firm, with millions of subscribers all around the world. And during that time, I'm proud to say we helped countless people from all walks of life. However, in December 2020, I retired to allow my firm.
Aerospace companies started using metal 3D printing over a decade ago to construct small, complex parts, for example, the injector.
That is the most important part of any rocket engine, where you're basically got to take the liquid propellant and turn it into a fine mist that mixes really rapidly. And those have actually been transitioned to 3D printing all over the industry.
Traditionally, something like this, it's a rocket engine injector, so it mixes liquid oxygen and liquid methane propellants together, and this is what actually produces all the fire and flame that is in a rocket engine. Traditionally, it would be over 1,000 individual pieces, and it would take 9 months. But here, we're 3D printing the whole thing in one piece. It takes 2 weeks, and it costs 10 times less.
One of the big benefits of 3D printing is reducing the number of parts. Have you ever thought about how inside a rocket's combustion chamber, it gets really hot, up to 3,500 Kelvin? That's hot enough to melt virtually any metal. So how do the combustion chamber and rocket nozzle not melt? Well, the answer is they're cooled by passing the cryogenic propellants over them.
On the Space Shuttle main engines, I love to talk about them because inside those engines, it's hot enough to boil iron. On the outside, you can freeze stuff to the exterior of this because you're running liquid hydrogen through these things. But to make those, you basically had to take thousands of very small pipes, and then you would form them into the shape of the combustion chamber and the nozzle, and then you would braze weld them together. And this was a ridiculously labor-intensive task. You would have 1,080 individual pipes running up the side, all having to be welded together to make the combustion chamber and the nozzle on the Space Shuttle engines. So you can actually 3D print these things.
This is a rocket nozzle being 3D printed, and you can see the channels for the cryogenic propellants being printed right into the single part, instead of having to add 1,000 pipes on the outside. Smaller parts like these are typically 3D printed using metal powder and lasers.
So you can see the cooling channels are all being built as the one piece. So this is a nozzle. It really just lays down a layer of powder that's about a 20th the thickness of a human hair. So it's really, really fine layers, just over and over and over and over relentlessly for probably about a week or so, and then out comes a rocket nozzle. All printed as one piece. It's way cheaper than traditional. And this has 4 lasers going at once.
That's amazing.
I get asked a lot, well, aren't 3D printed metals not very strong, or how can it actually work? But the printed materials are stronger than they would be built traditionally. Actually, it's counterintuitive.
It is.
Because we develop our own custom alloys in-house. So we have a whole material science team just developing our own alloys for 3D printing. And the fact that it melts and then cools and solidifies very, very quickly, you can take advantage of that physics principle to get really strong alloys.
Another major benefit of 3D printing is that it allows for rapid iteration. You can build a part quickly, test it, and then redesign rapidly and print again.
So this is a version of the engine that's about 3 years old at this point, but what's amazing is when you actually look at the engine design today, it looks entirely different than this. So each version we build, we can iterate and make better. So that's the other, when we say software-driven manufacturing, that's really what it is. Since you don't have fixed tooling, all the part geometries are just controlled via the CAD model, and then the printers just print, direct from file, essentially. It means you can actually change the design extremely fast. So building a whole engine only takes us about a month. So then a month later, you can do a better version, and a month later, a better version than that. So this particular one will actually be, I believe, one of the first flight engines that's actually launching to orbit on our first rocket.
So this tubing, not 3D printed, right?
Not today.
Okay.
And the future versions, we're actually, integrating that into the printed housings, and we're going to have a way that that's all printed too.
Perhaps the biggest impact of the 3D printing approach could be to totally transform what a rocket looks like. With 3D printing, engineers can build parts that would be impractical or impossible with traditional techniques. Smooth, curvy, bio-inspired designs are just as easy to print as ordinary structures.
This is actually part of our next rocket, Terran R, so it's even larger.
This is like the base of a tank?
Yeah. So it's gonna go out, it's almost done printing, it's gonna go out about to here, so it's 16-foot diameter, but it's almost like a shell.
I was gonna say, this reminds me of suddenly we're in The Little Mermaid or something.
Yeah, it's just for stiffness though.
It's not that you plan to make it bio-inspired, it's that that structure is actually the optimal structure.
Yeah. We're actually designing many features in the rocket that could not be manufactured unless it was 3D printed, which is one of the secret sauces of why you had to build a whole company around it, is because our rocket actually looks entirely different 3D printed than it does traditionally. In my mind, it's been more akin to gas internal combustion engine to electric. Really, people are trying to put batteries and electric motors into existing products for decades. Everyone knew electric vehicles were the future, but Nissan and Ford had really not compelling products for a long time. It wasn't until a company came along, called Tesla, that decided, well, actually, the shift to electrification means the batteries, the electric motors, the factory, the design of the product, how we're actually going to scale the company, the supply chain, all of it's different because of electrification. I mean, that's in some ways the dirty secret of electric cars and why they're able to be automated in production, because the part count is so much lower. So for a fully 3D printed rocket, we have 100 times fewer parts, which is what we're guiding to. There's no fixed tooling in our factory at all. Unlike the rest of aerospace, that's still really 60 years later, even since Apollo, building products one at a time by hand with hundreds of thousands to millions of individual parts, and no one's really changed that paradigm of how an aerospace factory actually fundamentally works. Yeah, this is the new fully 3D printed rocket. So yeah, we'll have dragonfly wing type structures, and we're building it still, but that's the first one, and then that's that one for scale. So yeah, it is definitely bigger. Yeah, so our rocket is named Terran 1 and Terran R, and then our 3D printer is Stargate, so all the things at Relativity are named after StarCraft. So yeah, of course the Stargate printer was what the Protoss used to warp in spaceships, and so that's what's warping in spaceships at Relativity. We have a system in our avionics called a pylon that we have to build a lot of, so we always joke we have to construct additional pylons. Most people don't know how a rocket's built traditionally at all anyway. And I think a lot of people assume it's rockets, so shouldn't it be already very advanced and robots everywhere? And Elon's got SpaceX and Tesla, so doesn't SpaceX just look like Tesla with all these robots and automation? But that's really not true. I mean, aerospace hasn't adopted automation at all.
One of the issues, right, is that you're not making a lot of rockets.
Right.
So there's no incentive to figure out how to tool up a factory to pump out rockets 100 a day or something.
Exactly.
Like you would for cars.
Exactly. You're not making a lot. Even with commercial aircraft, you're not making nearly as many. And there's orders of magnitude more parts and complexity. A commercial aircraft has several million individual parts. So to have robots assemble several million parts when an automobile has tens of thousands is completely different. It's a much harder problem. So that's where 3D printing is automation for aerospace, because you're not assembling all those parts with robots like you would with a car. You're assembling them in the 3D file, and then the printer just prints them assembled.
The plan for Relativity Space,
Yep.
Is it low Earth orbit or is it going further than that?
So for Terran 1, it's mostly low Earth orbit, the first rocket. Terran R can actually send payload to the moon, to Mars. I mean, it's pretty huge. I founded the company because I really thought that there needed to be dozens to hundreds of companies making Mars happen. We're focused on taking this 3D printing tech and what we call the factory of the future, and one day shrinking it down to something we'll actually launch to Mars and build an industrial base. So that's the long-term vision of the company, is build the industrial base on Mars. In many ways, this factory is just a prototype. It's still far smaller than a traditional factory. It's far lighter, and I think it's inevitable someone has to build this company.
Ancient constructs lurking in the dark, woven into shadows once their own, plagued by remnants of algorithmic imperatives.
You do not need to be liked by everybody. You need to choose your friends and your enemies carefully. I'm going to teach you how to be more powerful, because power leads to success. Some of the things we're going to talk about having you do are going to make you feel uncomfortable. If you think hard work, loyalty, and waiting your turn will get you promoted, you're dead wrong. You don't understand corporate politics. People less talented than you will take your promotion. Most people wait for permission, they wait for direction, they wait to be told what to do. Power favors those who move first. Attitudes follow behavior. So if you want to get rid of imposter syndrome, stop acting like an imposter. Don't resent power. Don't resent the people who have power. Master power. I'm Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer, and this is Masterclass.
Your beautiful new aircraft is waiting at our nearest airfield. We hope you're very happy, sir.
I don't know that in 10, 20 years that you will be 3D printing rockets all the time, because if you are flying lots of rockets, it becomes cheaper to have a dedicated machine for it. I do think that as a company, they are well placed, because even if Terran fails to capitalize on the market, even if nobody wants to use it as a launch vehicle, they are clearly now the world experts on 3D printing rocket hardware, because they've done everything, right? They've tried to apply 3D printing to places where a lot of people dismissed it. So I think they're sort of secure as a company. Whether we will see rockets being 3D printed all the time, that's a good question.
There's been a lot of talk recently about billionaires going to space. Yeah. Will a 3D printed rocket make it possible and a lot cheaper for me to go to space?
Yes, I mean, certainly what we're doing is lowering the cost. So our rockets are costing about 5 times to, I believe we can get to 10 or even 100 times cheaper with a fully reusable rocket than what we have today. So it can definitely climb down the cost curve. But I also think, going to Mars and the first people that are going, it really is about what is the point of being a human being. Like for me, why go to Mars is if we were having this conversation and 1 million people were living on another planet, I think it would expand the possibilities of human experience and what it means to be a person. Like we'd have YouTube channels on Mars and people sharing what life on Mars is like versus Earth, and there'd be long distance Amelie, like love story. Like I think there's just a lot of richness in what human culture and society can be about. Yes, I think there's criticism about billionaires going to space, and I don't agree with all of the projects need to actually add up to some vision that is meaningful. I think that's really important. But I do think going to Mars is really just about, we've lived for generations on Earth, so what's it all about? Like, why do we want to keep improving and getting better and furthering society on Earth? So for me, it's pretty existential, what it means to be a human being.
Hey, this video is sponsored by Omaze, offering you the chance to win a trip to space. The winner will get 2 seats on one of Virgin Galactic's first commercial space flights, meaning you and a guest will travel 80 kilometers up in the sky. You'll get to see the curve of planet Earth, experience weightlessness, and become one of the few people in the world to have gone to space. And you'll also get to join Sir Richard Branson for a personal VIP tour of Spaceport America. The flight is estimated to take place in early 2022, so enter at omaze.com/Veritasium for your chance to win. Now, Omaze partners with charities, in this case Space for Humanity, an organization whose mission is to expand access to space and train global leaders in the eventual goal of creating a sustainable future. So part of your contribution supports this cause. To potentially win a trip to space and support Space for Humanity, a great cause, go to omaze.com/Veritasium. I will put that link down in the description. So I want to thank Omaze for sponsoring this video, and I want to thank you for watching.
He tried to hide in the strip club. Hell nah. No, sir. You can't do that on Sunday. He tried to hide in the strip club. Hell nah. Sunday. It's closed.
Glass is inherently brittle. It is the very symbol we use for fragility. But these days, we expect so much from this material. We want it to be perfectly transparent, scratch-resistant, thin, and even flexible. But most of all, we want it not to break. So is it possible to make unbreakable glass?
Well, in this video, I will make the case that glass...
I'll bring it to you. You need something, huh? One of your rides? Let me know. I'll bring it to you.
We gonna see what this dude has to say.
So today we continue our exploration of secret societies. Last time we discussed how they come into power through transgression and cohesion. Today we're gonna look at where they actually come from and what they believe about the nature of reality. Now, I need to warn you that some of the material we cover today is genuinely controversial. There are certain concepts and words that trigger censorship on modern platforms. So I'll write certain things down rather than speaking them aloud. That itself should tell you something about the world we live in. The fact that certain ideas are literally unspeakable in our supposedly free society. But let's proceed, because understanding these hidden traditions is essential for understanding how power actually operates in the world. These aren't just historical curiosities. The beliefs we're going to explore have shaped the ruling class for centuries. They continue to shape it today. Also, I know some of you in the comment section have been asking how you can support my work, and I'm really grateful for that. It truly means a lot to me. So, I wanted to let you know that I've now set up YouTube Super Thanks and channel memberships. You'll see the Super Thanks button right below this video, and you can also check out the Memberships tab on my channel. But I want to be really clear, you absolutely don't have to do this. I'm committed to educating you for free. All my content will always be available to everyone at no cost. You don't have to pay me anything or feel any pressure whatsoever. But if you do have the means and you'd like to support the channel, I would really appreciate it.
EVE to me is basically freedom. It's a giant open universe where you can do whatever you want. You can have really relaxed, slow-paced stuff where you can take it easy. Or you could be on the edge of your seat, shaking, making split-second decisions.
Your support helps me continue creating this content and keep improving what I do here. So yeah, Super Thanks and memberships are now available if you're interested. Thank you so much for being here and for your support in whatever form it takes. To understand secret societies, I first need to explain the history of religion in the Western world. And I'm going to simplify for the purpose of clarity. This is a condensed version, a sketch, rather than a complete portrait. But it will give you the framework you need. In the Western world, there have been three major stages of religious development. First was the mother goddess civilization. Second was polytheism, meaning belief in many gods. Third was monotheism, meaning belief in one god. Each stage represented a fundamental transformation in how humans understood themselves and their relationship to the cosmos. And each transition involved conflict. Ideas don't replace other ideas peacefully. They conquer them. The mother goddess civilization arose because of agriculture. When humans began farming, they faced two fundamental problems. The first problem was making sure their crops were healthy and could be harvested in time. The second problem was having as many children as possible to work the fields. These two problems shaped everything about how early agriculture societies organized themselves. and they gave rise to a particular kind of religious worldview centered on fertility and reproduction. At the center of this religion was the womb. The woman's womb was considered a divine portal, a gateway from the spirit world into the material world. Think of it almost like a cave through which the spiritual realm can manifest itself in physical form. Because the womb was central to this worldview, women held the highest status in society. They were seen as direct representatives of the mother goddess who ruled the universe. Women controlled the religious rituals. Women interpreted the divine will. Now, in this world, everything was understood to be interconnected, harmonized, balanced together. The womb was the center, but it connected to everything else. It connected to the stars above. This gave rise to astrology, the study of celestial movements, and their influence on earthly affairs. It connected to the crops in the fields, the rhythms of planting and harvest. In an ideal situation, all three would be aligned. By reading the stars, you would know when to plant crops. You would know when was the best time to conceive children. Everything flowed together in a great cosmic dance. Usually in these societies, the mother goddess was represented as a bird. Why a bird? Think about it. Of all the animals in nature, it's the bird that has dominion over the sky. If life comes from above, if the spiritual realm is associated with the heavens, then the Divine Mother must be a creature of the air. But the Mother Goddess was also paired with another symbol, the bull. This represents virility and masculine energy. Women cannot conceive children by themselves, they need the masculine principle. So the bird and the bull together represented the complete divine reality, feminine and masculine, heaven and earth, spirit and matter. Now, this world was very strange from our modern perspective. There was no concept of private property. Everything belonged to everyone. There was no rigid hierarchy. Everyone was essentially equal within the community. And there was no concept of exclusive sexual partnership. Sex was actually a community act. They had rituals called fertility cults in which groups would have sex together, multiple men with one woman. This seems shocking to us, but it made perfect sense in their worldview. Think about it from the woman's perspective. You want to have the best possible children. You want the best genetic material. But you don't know which man has the best genes. So you mate with many men and let nature sort it out.
On December 19th, 2025, the deadline arrived. For the first time in American history, Congress had passed a law with near unanimous support demanding the full release of Jeffrey Epstein's files. The vote was 427-1 in the House.
The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Whoever that one guy is, I think we should check his hard drive. This is the reason he voted against it, by the way, this is perfectly valid, but I think that we can also release the files and also do this, right? And after the shocking unanimous votes, even more shockingly, Trump signed it within 24 hours, which is a shocking shift from the previous attempts to shut down further inquiry, and it's quite far away from it being a Democratic hoax. It seems like. Either way, the law was clear. Release everything within 30 days. Release all the photos, release all the documents, and most importantly, release all of the names. Now, what the Justice Department actually released instead is something else entirely. At least 550 pages were completely blacked out. You've probably seen memes and videos of people doing this type of thing where, 50 billion or whatever. You know what I'm saying? These pages were not partially redacted, they were completely covered in black boxes from top to bottom. Even a 119-page grand jury transcript was solid black on every single page. And then The next morning, files started disappearing from the government website listing all the files. For example, this file, a photograph showing Donald Trump's image that was visible on Epstein's desk. It was visible Friday and gone Saturday afternoon. More than a dozen files had been pulled without explanation. The explanation, though, seems kind of obvious. They forgot to put the black marks over them. Also, they didn't do that right either, which we'll get into. Within 48 hours, the same bipartisan lawmakers who'd written the transparency law were threatening to hold Attorney General Pam Bondi in contempt of Congress.
And Congressman Ro Khanna says that he and Representative Massey, again bipartisan here, are going to hold Attorney General Pam Bondi in contempt and have previously said they are considering impeachment.
Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna are pissed. Thomas Massey, by the way, is kind of becoming a local legend in the American government for being a guy who is honest, which is rare, it seems like. But Thomas and Ro have called for inherent contempt and have floated the idea of filing impeachment articles. Both had co-authored the bill together to get all of this released. And meanwhile, newly released photos showed Bill Clinton shirtless in a hot tub next to a person whose face had been blacked out, as well as swimming in a pool with Ghislaine Maxwell. And Bill's spokesman fired back, calling the release a scapegoat operation. I don't understand how at this point you can't see this as a total clown show. If you're a victim, it has to be even worse. Marina Lacerda, who was abused by Epstein when she was 14 years old, watched this happen and said it felt like a slap in the face.
I think all of us, if I can say, we are infuriated with this. And I feel like it's another slap in our faces.
And that she personally expected way more. And she's a literal victim of this. This is the story of what was supposed to be the most transparent document release in American history and how it has become the most controversial drop of documents ever. This makes everything Watergate, all the scandals look like nonsense in comparison because it implicates the most powerful people in the entire world, and they're actively trying to hide it and cover up things because they released too much. For example, like not fully redacting PDFs to where you can just copy the text and then paste it in another document. Dumb! On November 18th, 2025, the House floor was the same battleground that it had been for years. Political parties spent hours playing the blame game about why things were taking so long and why things aren't affordable and whether or not the word affordable is a Democrat psyop. For months, the Epstein Files Transparency Act had been stalled. Dinosaurs were still busy pointing fingers at each other over who was responsible, rather than just shutting the f*** up and getting on with it. President Trump, who'd repeatedly claimed the files would expose his political enemies like Bill Clinton and had stated he'd release the documents ahead of the 2024 election, had also then not so privately opposed the bill, calling it a Democratic hoax. The Trump White House said that helping Thomas Massey and the efforts to release the files would be viewed as a very hostile act to the administration, which is, I'm guilty. That's how that translates. By the way, I'm very unbiased. Republican leadership blocked it from coming to a vote, but then something bizarre happened, guys. Representative Thomas Massey, a Kentucky Republican, filed a discharge petition in September 2025 to force the vote. And by November 12th, the petition had collected 218 signatures, the minimum required to force the vote. Oh my God, something's gonna happen! Be quiet! I'm working! 4 Republicans and every Democrat in the House had signed on. These 4 Republicans were the ones who signed, just for your information. I don't know why that's important, but I've really been getting into lists lately, making lists of names of people in the government who vote on certain bills and don't. Now, with this moving forward, because apparently our government still has checks and balances, Trump dropped his opposition to this all coming out. And this, by the way, is a terrible look when the bill came to the floor. The final vote wasn't even close. 427 members voted yes. Exactly 1 congressman, Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana, voted no. And he said that he was worried the release might harm innocent people mentioned in the investigation, which that is a fair worry, I guess, and that requires a lot of context, and you're voting yes or no, your track record, yes. Did you just vote yes? Of course. We'll solve this later. People don't want the blood of the innocents and the victims. They want the blood of the pedophile cabal that is apparently incumbent in our administration in this country. Not just the political administration, but I mean the literal administrative power that controls everything that we do, whether it be corporate, scholarly, there's everybody of all likes and kinds. Noam Chomsky, for example. To really critique wealth, capitalism, and corruption, you have to rub shoulders with it. It seems like. Either way, Clay seemed like he's trying to take the high road, but what do the victims want? The victims are among those calling for the release of all the files. So, sorry, Clay, you're kind of completely a minority and looking really suspicious right about now. Although I'm trying to use my brain to see it not so suspiciously. But once again, the Senate passed it unanimously and Trump signed it on November 19th. And that means that Clay Higgins is the only motherfucker who didn't approve the release of the Epstein files. After this, the deadline is set 30 days to release all unclassified records related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The law required the Attorney General to make everything publicly available in a searchable and downloadable format. It also required something else: an unredacted list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named in the files to be given directly to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. For victims who'd spent years fighting for accountability, it seemed like a breakthrough. Everyone implicated, if they're in some form of power, their names cannot be redacted. That being said, there were still things that were permitted to be withheld from the release. Personally identifiable information of victims, child sexual abuse material, items that would potentially jeopardize active federal investigations and ongoing prosecution, images of death, abuse, and injury. Also, information specifically authorized under criteria established by an executive order to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy. Essentially, if he was a CIA or Mossad agent, they're going to protect that, obviously. That's what that means, though. But this is what the law explicitly said could not be withheld. And this is crucial because it's the standard that the DOJ was legally required to meet. No record shall be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. It specifically prohibited hiding information because it might harm someone's reputation. So basically, get losers. It specifically named government officials and public figures as people that redactions could not protect. Section 3 went even further. It required the Attorney General to submit within 15 days a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the release materials. Another one of those lists I'd love to get my hands on. And the key part of that is with no redactions permitted. So give us all the names and you can't redact any of them. And that from the bottom to the top passed all of our forms of government, all of our different beautiful little branches, the House, the Senate, the executive. Trumpenheimer signed off on it. We are going to get an unredacted list of every politician and public figure in the Epstein files. That is what Congress demanded and what was signed executively. It's what 427 motherfuckers voted for, and we voted for them to do this type of stuff. That is what the law requires. Now, remember that when we look at what the Department of Justice, whatever the actually released, because the gap between what the law demanded and what the public received isn't even disappointing. It is criminal. It is literally criminal. There should be tarring and feathering, dude. My Christmas was incredible, but it was ruined because we have criminals walking around on land that's paid for by our tax dollars. It makes me levitate with anger and rage and, I don't know, some other strange feeling. A feeling of really wanting a lot of lists of all these people. All the names of just these people on the list. I really like lists all of a sudden. To understand why this release matters so much, you have to go way back to 2008. Police in Palm Beach, Florida had been investigating Jeffrey Epstein since 2005. Case started when a parent reported that Epstein had sexually abused their 14-year-old daughter. By 2008, the FBI had identified numerous additional victims. But instead of facing federal charges despite a 60-count indictment being drafted, Epstein got what prosecutors would later call the infamous sweetheart deal, with Alexander Acosta being the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida at the time, appointed by George W. Bush. Acosta approved a non-prosecution agreement that shut down the FBI's investigation entirely. And under the terms, Epstein pled guilty to 2 state charges: solicitation of prostitution, one involving a minor. He was sentenced to 18 months in a county jail. He served 13 of them in a private wing and was allowed to leave for 12 hours a day on work release to his Palm Beach office. During that time, it was reported that he continued to fly women in for sex at his office despite being under the watchful eye of officers, state chaperone officers who treated him like a VIP. It is absolutely disgusting and completely criminal. The sweetheart deal that Epstein got granted him immunity from all federal charges and also gave immunity to 4 named co-conspirators and any unnamed potential co-conspirators. The victims were not consulted, and regarding this, many of them didn't even know the deal had been struck until it was already done. Former federal prosecutor Eli Honig called it completely unprecedented.
More than highly unusual, I would call it completely unprecedented. I don't know that I've ever seen a deal that lenient in a case.
That's because there hasn't been one, because there's only one Jeffrey Epstein, and there's only one guy with as much power and blackmail as him. It's never happened before, at least in our version of Rome. And then in 2019, a federal judge ruled the agreement was illegal. Then, Judge Kenneth Mara found that Acosta's office had violated the Crimes Victims' Rights Act by failing to notify victims about the deal before it was finalized. In fact, the judge ruled that Acosta illegally hid the deal from the victims. But by then, we're only 6 months before Jeffrey Epstein would be murdered in prison. He'd been arrested on new federal charges in July of 2019 and was soon found dead in his Manhattan jail cell a month later on August 10th, with the medical examiner ruling it a sewer slide. Conspiracy theories have persisted ever since. He was definitely murdered, though, for sure. There is no doubt. And Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate, was arrested a little later in 2020 and convicted of sex trafficking in December 2021. She is currently serving a 20-year sentence and pretty much has a sweetheart deal. She's just chilling in Texas, to be honest. But anyway, the only other person ever connected to the sex trafficking of minors with Epstein was Jean-Luc Brunel, a French modeling scout who died in prison of an apparent sewer slide, apparent murder, self-murder. I don't really know. There is still an objective question that has haunted this whole investigation and case for over a decade that remains unanswered still to this day. Who else was involved? This file release was supposed to answer that. Finally, who were those other co-conspirators back in 2008 that were part of the sweetheart deal that received immunity? Who were those people? I'm sure they were good people. December 19th, 2025, 30 days after Trump signed the law, the Justice Department announced its release that morning on Twitter. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche sent a letter to Congress explaining the approach. The files would go up on a new website called the Epstein Library, and they would be available for everyone to parse through. But anyone expecting full transparency, it was about to be disappointed for some reason. How can we ever expect transparency from our government, guys? Let's be real. And I'm not just talking about the current administration. There's a long violent history here. There is not a time in which there is transparency with our government. There isn't. Maybe this. But unfortunately, all we have left of this is a memorial mug of this man. Maybe this guy right here. Yes, that's gum, okay? It's really old, but still has flavor. Delicious. I like JFK. I like him a lot, all right? How about the PT-109? He was a war hero. He was a war hero, and he was a little weak and frail. But he was also on the Harvard swim team. There was a guy who got burned up. The PT-109 was a torpedo boat that got split in two. All right, he saved a guy's life. He swam with a guy to an island, and they just... Are you kidding me? That was a president at one time? And then he also said, no, I'm not gonna shoot down a drone aircraft and blame it on the Cubans and get us into World War III? He said no to that, and then everybody else was like, we'll kill you. And then they shot him? You're telling me there was a guy like that? Makes me want to pull on my beast toy. Makes me want to pull on my beast toy. The release was partial. Blanche said the department would continue uploading files on a rolling basis over coming weeks. When asked why they couldn't meet the deadline Congress had set, he cited the need to protect victims. Okay, guys, he cited that need. The material that we released on Friday is exactly what the statute requires us to release.
The material that we released on Friday, or the material that we're going to release over the next couple of weeks, is exactly what the statute requires us to release.
Blanche later said on NBC's Meet the Press,
the reason why we are still reviewing documents and still continuing our process is simply that, to protect victims.
Now, The numbers don't meet the meaningless rhetoric, the hot diarrhea flowing out of this man's hole. CBS News analyzed the initial release and found that 550 pages were completely blacked out. No partial redactions, just black. No names with black bars over them, just black. One series of 3 consecutive documents totaling 255 pages was entirely redacted. Every single page was covered with a black box. A 4th document labeled Grand Jury New York ran 119 pages, and all of them were solid black. The 119-page document turned out to be the transcript from the grand jury proceedings against Ghislaine Maxwell. The DOJ claimed it was released in a separate batch on Saturday with minimal redactions, but by then, the damage is already done. You are clearly hiding, picking and choosing. This is not about victims. This is about saving face. And it's completely illegal. You're violating the law. Who goes to jail when the government just violates the law? You get the secret police going and knocking on people's doors because they have a gun that's an inch too short, or because they've been living here for too long without the right papers or whatever But when these fools in Washington do this and they violate the law objectively that everybody wants, there's no consequences, guys. There's no consequences. There's no tarring. There's no feathering. Why not? It is a complete and total transparency failure. No redactions based on embarrassment. Remember, guys, no redactions based on embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. Yet, the Deputy AG Blanche's letter to Congress admitted using deliberative process privilege, work product privilege, and executive branch deliberations as justifications for redactions. Oh, the law Congress passed demands explicitly as well the release of the DOJ's internal communications. So what the are the privileges that AG Blanche cited? The Epstein Files Transparency Act was designed to override those privileges. Representative Ro Khanna said Pam Bondi is breaking the law, and this is the corrupt system, the Epstein class that people are sick of. She didn't say failing to meet the spirit of the law. She said breaking it. That is an accusation of criminal conduct against the sitting attorney general made by a sitting member of Congress. By the way, the sitting member of Congress was elected. The AG was appointed. Then on Saturday, the problems got even worse. NPR identified more than a dozen files from Friday's release that were no longer accessible by Saturday afternoon. They'd been available one day, then gone the next with no public notice. But of course, there were some young geniuses out there scraping the PDFs and downloading them all, and they're all backed up. And the original versions are all saved. I don't know anyone who would do that, but I don't have them on a server in my house. I don't have that. I'm not that interested. I was visiting my family. It was Christmas time. One of the missing files is a particularly notable file, document EFTA 0000468.pedophile. It was a photograph showing Trump's image on a desk among other photographs. The photo appeared to have been taken in one of Epstein's properties, and the Trump photo had been visible on Friday, but by Saturday afternoon, it was gone. Now, the Justice Department said it had temporarily removed the image for further review at the request of the Southern District of New York, and the photo was restored on Sunday without any alteration or redaction, but the brief and sudden removal of such things tends to fuel accusations of a cover-up because we're witnessing that in real time, and they just can't stop. You can't stop it. They're already, the cat's out of the bag. You have to make sure that they're released. You can't unrelease stuff. That's not how that works, on the internet at least. Senator Chuck Schumer called the handling one of the biggest cover-ups in American history. I think it objectively is. I think that there's nothing that's ever come close, and there's people's entire careers and lives that have been ruined. For example, Watergate, Contra, Iran-Contra. This is small fry compared to this. Those are small fries, all right? By the way, Oliver North, seen him at the vet's office once, Northern Virginia. It's all Oliver North in there. Come on now. Come on, dude. I was like, how's that Iran-Contra thing going there, buddy? I was like 16 years old. I didn't say anything about Iran-Contra. It's probably one of the most confusing happenings in the American government of all time. I recommend looking up Sean Munger's video on it. There's a video, it's like 3 hours long. It's really good. I think his name's Sean Munger. It's a history channel. Anyways, guys, sorry, but there's good channels out there that make excellent content that are not mine. If you want to go check some of that out. Representative Jamie Raskin was slightly more direct than old Charlie Schumer. I mean Chuck. He characterized the removals as covering up things that Donald Trump doesn't want to go public. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but seems kind of obvious there. The DOJ denied any political motivation for any of this. They said, there's no effort to hold back or not hold back because of that, Blanche said about Trump's mentions in the files, which is hilarious, coming from him, a criminal. But the disappearing files weren't the only evidence of incompetence, or something potentially even worse. While the DOJ was busy removing and restoring documents from its official website, CoffeeZilla discovered that the FBI had accidentally left approximately 11,000 documents accessible through an unindexed URL. That is a Uniform Resource Locator. The files were internally labeled Volume 8, and the FBI didn't yet intend for them to be made public. Coffee and the team he's working with at both Jmail and DropSite.
It wasn't like indexable on search, but you could just type in the specific URL and it would just come up. You could download the entire zip file, and that's what we did.
Discovered this unreleased data set by guessing predictable URL patterns to access the files which were on the site but not posted to the publicly available registry. Basically, their little intranet that they forgot to turn off. By the way, this is the same DOJ that claimed it needed 200 lawyers to review documents carefully, but just left pages open. Anyone with basic technical knowledge could just walk through. You could just guess. You could type in the URL wrong, and you could see this stuff. What the hell? Guys, guess what? It gets worse. Many of the redacted documents were redacted improperly. Black boxes were placed over the text, but the data beneath them remained. What that meant is that anyone viewing these pages could simply highlight, click, and drag the text, including the redacted sections, copy it, paste it into something like Notepad or Microsoft Word, or send it to an email to your grandmother or something like that, and you could just read the redacted information. Some of the reporting called the people who were doing this hackers, but it is more appropriate to call it blatant and embarrassing carelessness and hackers, but it is more appropriate to call it blatant and embarrassing carelessness and unbelievable lack of skill and executive mental function from the people involved in the release of these files. The government spent 9 months reviewing the files with over 200 lawyers and spent millions of taxpayer dollars, but it took us just copying and pasting it to undo that work. What? Now, Volume 8 was made publicly available shortly after its discovery and exposure by CoffeeZilla, but obviously the damage is done at that point. Time and time again, they have revealed how incompetent they are. Now, the incompetence is clear, or maybe someone wanted these files to be discovered and wanted a way to maintain plausible deniability when they were officially released. Because if anything, I mean, look at it, it's just like, whoever did this is either an idiot or they're just pretty transparent. They're just pro-transparency. I tell you what, quite a few people probably got fired though. By Sunday, the lawmakers who had written the transparency law were furious, as you could probably imagine. Representative Thomas Massie, the Kentucky Republican who'd forced the vote with his discharge petition, went on CBS's Face the Nation. He said that he was considering inherent contempt against Attorney General Pam Bondi. He said, "I think the most expeditious way to get justice for these victims is to bring inherent contempt against Pam Bondi." He suggested Bondi could face daily fines or even possible obstruction of justice charges if the full files weren't released. Representative Ro Khanna, the California Democrat who'd co-sponsored the bill with Massie, said he was considering filing impeachment articles. I say do it, dude. I say the higher the turnover rate for these dumbasses, the better for the American people. Maybe we can get some young people in there for once.
What do you need, boss? Some wheels?
I'm just kidding. That has nothing to do with anything. It genuinely does not. There's plenty of really good old people. Believe me, I know some of them. Believe me, I know some. I know some good olds. I know some good olds. The two men came from opposite ends of the political spectrum, and they'd worked together to pass a law with 427 votes, and now they were united again in demanding its enforcement. Senator Rand Paul recommended a simpler approach. My suggestion would be give up all the information, release it. Yeah, sure, that makes perfect sense. Why not? Just do that. Do that, Rand Paul. His father, one of the very few good olds, to be honest with you. And he's really old. That guy's really old. I used to love Ron Paul so much. Oh my God. Ron Paul, dude. such an old grouchy curmudgeon. Ross Perot, he was around before my time, but I've read and learned about him plenty. He's a legend. He actually bought, my family used to have a farm in Maryland that was then sold to Ross Perot, and he built a Six Flags on it. So I have family members that are buried under a Six Flags in Maryland. How crazy is that? It was my dad's brother's farm. So Ross Perot bought it. Anyways, guys, I'm sorry, press the like button. In only the American system can a law designed to bring transparency produce more questions than answers. That seems to be the American way. Files that were supposed to expose the powerful were themselves being protected by those same exact powers. Despite the redactions, the files that were released did contain some new information. Some of it was new, okay? Some of it had confirmed what we had long suspected. Documents included photographs, interviews, transcripts, call logs, court records, and other material spanning nearly 2 decades of federal scrutiny of Jeffrey Epstein. House Democrats released 19 photos from approximately 95,000 images obtained from the Epstein estate, with additional images released later. Photos showed a who's who of influential figures from politics, entertainment, business, and tech. Bill Clinton appeared in multiple photos, and additional photos captured him on a 2002 trip to Africa with actor Kevin Spacey. The photos don't show Clinton doing anything illegal, but they contradicted statements he'd made over the years, the statements downplaying his relationship with Epstein. And to be clear, Clinton has never been accused of any wrongdoing in connection with Epstein from victims. Clinton's spokesman said after the release of all these files in a statement that essentially accused the Trump administration of using Clinton as a political weapon. This goes really hard, to be honest. The White House hasn't been hiding these files for months, only to dump them late on a Friday to protect Bill Clinton, said Angel, spokesman of Bill Clinton. This is about shielding themselves from what comes next, or from what they'll try and hide forever. Whoa. I don't like any of these people. That's pretty hard, though, to be honest. Further in the statement, they divided Epstein's associates into 2 groups. The first group knew nothing and cut Epstein off before his crimes came to light, and the second group continued relationships with him after they said the Clintons are in the first group. And I said, what about Haiti? The Clinton spokesman later called for the DOJ to release any remaining materials involving Clinton, saying the former president has nothing to hide, which genuinely is an impressive level of confidence, and I wish everybody implicated in these files would just get out right ahead of it and say, release it all, I have nothing to hide. But it seems like they've all got a lot to hide, or they would just do that. I believe that Bill Clinton doesn't have anything to hide in regard to that. Still the president of the United States, still a sexual pervert, still a freak, still don't like him at all, still hate all of these people. So, the Department of Justice, for its part, said there was no evidence to predicate further investigations into uncharged third parties, such as Clinton, based on the release of the files. So, Clinton's solid. The celebrity photos are something else. Clinton wasn't the only famous face in the files. The released photos showed connections between Epstein and a wide range of new public figures, some familiar, some unfamiliar. Photos don't imply wrongdoing by any of these individuals. Obviously, many of them show nothing more than social interactions at events or locations. Donald Trump appeared in multiple photos. One showed his image on a desk in what appears to be an Epstein property. A message slip indicated Trump had called Epstein at some point. A photo of a $22,500 check with Trump's signature was included. And it's actually another angle of the picture included in the Epstein birthday book, which also contained a novelty-sized check for $22,500, which the Trump administration had denied. Epstein is wearing the same black shirt with an American flag on the arm, but while the birthday book image covered the USA on the shirt, the new picture, frame picture, has the check held lower, which exposes the USA, and both pictures have a redacted woman in black. Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, defended the president. He's not in the file doing anything awful. Well, Susie Wiles, according to a supposed FBI tip intake form associated with case ID SOD New York 3027571, located within the Epstein files release, it is alleged that Trump did something quite terrible. By the way, alleged. This is really bad, and it is really alleged. document quotes a person claiming to be a former limousine driver who stated a woman had told him he me in reference to Trump, and that Donald J. Trump had her along with Jeffrey Epstein. The driver claimed he overheard Trump on a phone call in 1995 referencing someone named Jeffrey and abusing some girl. And this is distinct from a previously known 2016 lawsuit in which a woman using the pseudonym Jane Doe alleged that Trump and Epstein were her when she was 13 years old at Epstein's Manhattan residence in 1994. That lawsuit was filed in April 2016, refiled multiple times, and voluntarily dismissed on November 4th, 2016, days before the election, reportedly after the plaintiff received threats. Reportedly. The 2025 files contain a different account, an unverified secondhand allegation from a 2020 tipster. The DOJ addressed this preemptively, posting on X. By the way, that's where they post. Some of the documents contain sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to FBI before 2020 election. To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false. The FBI intake form does not indicate whether the tip was ever investigated or corroborated. Its existence isn't evidence of wrongdoing, as it's unverified raw intelligence. That being said, it still raises some questions. Why does this get a preemptive denial when things we'll soon discuss do not? Remember, guys, you have to be consistent morally, spiritually, intellectually. You have to be consistent. You cannot be a hypocrite. If you jump the fence too many times, you might get impaled by it. Oh, nasty Steve Bannon appeared in several photos, including one with Epstein behind a desk and another showing both men taking a selfie in a mirror. Emails showed Bannon had corresponded frequently with Jeffrey Epstein. Bannon had reportedly been working on an unreleased documentary about Epstein to rehabilitate his image. Through the documentary, it was paid for by Epstein. So that's an epic win. Great job. Bill Gates appeared in some photos, one with Prince Andrew, another outside a private plane, and two more with women whose identities are redacted. Gates later issued a statement and said, "I was foolish to spend any time with him. Just a huge mistake." Other names in the photos include Woody Allen, Alan Dershowitz, who was Epstein's lawyer, Richard Branson, shown on a beach, Mick Jagger, David Copperfield was pictured with Maxwell, Prince Andrew was laying across a line of redacted individuals, who was later stripped of his royal titles for his relationship with Epstein and multiple allegations made against him. Total freakazoid. One controversy did arise over photos of Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. Initial reports suggested that the faces redacted in the image were those of Epstein's victims, but closer examination revealed that the redacted faces were actually their children in a 2003 photo that was already publicly known. And the lack of context for so many photos with no dates, no locations, and no explanations of the circumstances make them very challenging to interpret, and in a Transparency Act, it's kind of like this is not transparency, guys. It's really not. A photo of someone with Epstein doesn't prove anything on its own. Nothing. A significant question is, what happened when the cameras weren't rolling? Who are these co-conspirators that were granted immunity? We need to know this type of stuff. Photos with Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody has a photo with Jeffrey Epstein, apparently. Except for me! So obviously, the celebrity photos were not the most significant revelation. Buried in the files were FBI emails that named some names, not just people photographed with Epstein, but people the FBI was actively investigating as potential co-conspirators in regard to Epstein. An FBI email from July 9th, 2019, just weeks before Epstein's death, referenced 10 co-conspirators the agency was tracking. The email from the Crimes Against Children Human Trafficking Unit noted that 3 had been located in Florida and served grand jury subpoenas. Others were found in Boston, New York, and Connecticut, and then there was this line. One is a wealthy businessman in Ohio. The related email from July 7th was more specific about who this businessman may have been, saying, "I do not know about Ohio contacting Wexner." This is Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secret and Bath and Body Works. Wexner is a man who had previously given Epstein power of attorney over his entire fortune, and the $77 million Manhattan mansion where many of Epstein's victims were abused was previously owned by Wexner before being transferred to Epstein for reasons and an amount that remain unclear until this day. Similarly, Epstein's private jet, known as Lolita Express, was also previously owned by Les Wexner before it was transferred to Epstein in 2001 for an unknown amount. Emails sent on July 26, 2019 to Sigrid McCauley, an attorney who represented Virginia Giuffre, an Epstein victim, also details how dozens of phone numbers were listed for Wexner in Epstein's Little Black Book for various properties he owned, staff at those properties, and other executives at Wexner's companies. By the way, Wexner pretty closely tied into old Abercrombie and Fitch, which is a video that's coming next week. Wexner's attorney claimed the assistant U.S. attorney stated at the time that Wexner was neither a co-conspirator nor a target, but that raises its own questions. If he wasn't a target, why was the FBI discussing whether to contact him in the same emails about co-conspirators? Why was he included in that conversation at all? Wexner is tied in with a lot of freaks. In October 2024, Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, whom Wexner hired in 1992, was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking. Jeffries allegedly used a network to lure young men to sex events between 2008 and 2015. The world is full of disgusting, powerful people. There is no documented direct link between Wexner and Jeffries' alleged crimes. This guy just happens to rub shoulders with evil fuckers, apparently, sex traffickers. Wexner signed Epstein's 50th birthday card in 2003 with a drawing of a naked woman, and this was years after Epstein's behavior should have been apparent to anyone who was paying attention, and the initial federal investigation began in 2005, 2 years after that. So, Les Wexner has long been speculated to be one of the co-conspirators in Epstein's trafficking, but no undeniable evidence has ever been discovered. It's all just coincidence and the connection to brands and individuals who have reputations for abuse and reputations for preying on men and women alike. So think of that however you want, but the question about what was in the files pales in comparison to a more fundamental question. Could we even trust that these documents are authentic, that they're real? A letter within Volume 8 of the Epstein documents went viral immediately after it was discovered because Jeffrey Epstein allegedly wrote it to Larry Nassar, the USA gymnastics doctor that was convicted of sexually abusing hundreds of young athletes and sentenced to 40 to 125 years in prison in 2018. The letter referenced our president, Donald Trump, sharing our love of young, nubile girls. Within hours, the DOJ declared it was likely fake in a tweet, stating they were looking into the letter's validity and citing 3 pieces of evidence for its inauthenticity. Postmark on the envelope is Virginia, not New York, where Epstein was jailed at the time it was written and sent. The return address listed is the wrong jail for Epstein and didn't include his inmate number, which is a requirement for outgoing mail, and the envelope was processed 3 days after Epstein's death. So they just have fake shit in the Epstein files. There's some of it's just not real, it's fake. FBI knew about these problems for years. The letter was discovered in September of 2019 by a Bureau of Prison Special Investigative Section lieutenant when it was returned to the sender. On July 31st, 2020, 4.5 years before being released to the public, the FBI requested a handwriting analysis to determine if it was actually legitimate. Although the document requesting handwriting analysis is available, the results are not. Conspiracy theorists may claim that's because the results would say that it is authentic and they can't let that get out. But another option is that the deadline to deliver the results was October 30th, 2020 to arrive in time for the trial, but Epstein dies 10 days after the analysis was requested on August 10th, 2019. So the DOJ had 200 lawyers reviewing documents for victims' names and redactions, but no one thought to flag a letter that they'd known was suspicious and possibly inauthentic since 2019. Guys, no one created a system to mark documents of questionable authenticity before just dumping them to the public. 1 point for incompetency. And if this letter's fake, how many other documents are just fabricated? Why is there a fake letter? For survivors who'd spent years pushing for transparency, I cannot imagine how this release feels. It's got to feel like a massive betrayal at a level the likes of which have never even been seen. Then there's a cover-up and so on and so forth. Marina Lacerda was 14 when she was abused by Epstein. She became a key witness in the 2019 investigation that led to his arrest and then murder. The drop of the redacted files disappointed her massively. See by this quote. Lacerda also pointed out that many of the photos that were released seemed irrelevant to actually understanding Epstein's crimes. Various victims searched released files for documents that they knew should exist, their own victim statements, records of their calls to FBI tip lines, but the victims could not find them. Then, one survivor who had only ever identified herself anonymously as Jane Doe throughout all legal proceedings discovered her real name appeared unredacted multiple times in the released files. So not only did they not redact, it's so unbelievable, unbelievably unfair to everyone involved, except for the people who are actually implicated. The same Department of Justice that blacked out 119 pages of grand jury testimony, which should be available, supposedly to protect victims, left a Jane Doe's real name unredacted multiple times. They protected the testimony while exposing the testifier. Attorneys Brad Edwards and Brittany Henderson, who represent over 200 survivors, confirmed that a sealed document from a civil litigation containing the names of more than 24 alleged victims was posted without any redactions. The document was supposed to be sealed, it was supposed to be confidential, but instead it was uploaded to a public government website with every single name visible. A bunch of politicians got their names scrubbed and redacted, and actual victims did not. Somehow, dude. I could understand if everything was unredacted and like, oh my god, there's so many victims now that are out here, this is terrible, this is having unintended consequences, but no, you're redacting shit that just shouldn't be redacted at all, and you're not redacting things that should. And you're saying the reason you don't want to release the files is because you want to protect the victims? What? Somehow the government is failing to represent the people on every single front. They're breaking the law on every single front. On one hand, they're over redacting information about the powerful and connected, something the Transparency Act explicitly prohibits. And on the other hand, they're under redacting information about the victims of Epstein, which is the very people the law was supposed to protect. Clay Higgins may not be so misguided, all right? In spite of all the jokes saying to check his computer and stuff, this guy knows the government, it seems. Either way, the DOJ is not trying to protect the victims. That is very obvious and clear. Attorney General Todd Blanche defended the department's approach in multiple different interviews. On Meet the Press, he argued the release complied with the law. He said the department had assembled a team of more than 200 retarded lawyers to review the documents. They were looking for survivors' names, violent photos, child sexual abuse material, and anything that might jeopardize ongoing investigations. The DOJ claimed that no politicians' names were redacted from the files, and Blanche was emphatic in stating, "We are not redacting names of individuals or politicians unless they are a victim." Like Trump. He's a victim in all this. So, the logical response to him saying they're trying to do the right thing is, why are you blacking out the whole pages? You can't read anything about any of it. There's 119 pages that are just completely blacked out. How are we supposed to understand the context? How could anyone verify what is contained? The department said 1,200 people's identities had been redacted from the released files so far. It claimed the redactions covered confidential information, privileged material, attorney work product, and executive deliberations. Everybody's mad, nobody likes it. The DOJ has promised more files would come out over the next couple weeks, but given what has happened with this first release, skepticism is certainly warranted from everyone's perspective. For anyone who has followed the Epstein case, the December 2025 release is familiar to everything else that has ever happened or come out in this entire thing. If you go back to 2008, the FBI had identified numerous victims, and the evidence is damning. But then, Alexander Acosta, connected, epically powerful lawyer guy, cuts a deal with Epstein that grants him immunity and then shuts down the investigation entirely. The Justice Department's own Office of Professional Responsibility would later find that Acosta had exercised poor judgment in negotiating the deal, and they stopped short of calling it misconduct, but the damage is obviously done. Epstein walks free and has 10 more years of abusing. His victims get nothing, and Acosta went on to serve as Trump's labor secretary from 2017 to 2019. He resigned after Epstein was arrested on new charges in July of 2019. In September of 2025, Acosta testified before the House Oversight Committee for 6 hours straight, with 172 pages of transcripts being released in October. According to the committee Democrats, he continues to deny he gave Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal, despite cutting the investigation short and granting Epstein a non-prosecution agreement, even though 30 victims had been identified at the time. Every single time the system got close to some level of accountability, full accountability, someone intervened. Some secret deal, a suspicious death, a mountain of redaction, some magic force that we have no control over. So the question still remains somehow, what was Jeffrey Epstein actually doing in all these redacted photographs and the unredacted ones? What is the context? He is so ugly, that's all we know. He's so hard to look at. The files released in December 2025 included images from approximately 95,000 photos in Jeffrey Epstein's possession. Photos of presidents, celebrities, business titans, royalty. Many were taken at his properties, on his planes, at his parties. Why is this guy documenting everything so meticulously? One theory that's sort of all-encompassing and creates a logical explanation for that magical force that undermines all forms of accountability and is that Epstein is a blackmail master. Master of collecting compromising material on powerful people as insurance or as a tool for manipulation, blackmail. Some allegedly say he did so for Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad. This theory has never been proven or disproven. What is in the several 100,000 files the DOJ is still processing? There's like 1 million they just found or some crazy shit like that? What did the grand jury hear that required 119 pages to transcribe and every single word of that transcription to be completely blacked out? Who are the potential co-conspirators in the 2008 deal that were granted immunity? And why is Ghislaine Maxwell, someone serving 20 years, gone from solitary confinement to the cushiest dig a pedophile could possibly get? Jeffrey Epstein is dead and Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail and Jean-Luc murdered himself or whatever. But the network that they allegedly ran, the pilots, the schedulers, the recruiters, the clients, all this remains largely unaccounted for. Files were supposed to answer these questions, and so far they have only raised new ones. But unfortunately, guys, that is the trend with all of this. Do not trust the government. Do not trust anyone who says, for transparency, because they're full of shit. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed, there'll be more of this, I'm sure. There's more files coming out. I'll see you in the next one.
Please, 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 stop using ChatGPT like Google. Disappear for a month and do this instead.
So this is how I became the most dangerous person in the room. One habit changed everything. I replaced social media with microlearning. Now, instead of wasting time on social media, I spend 15 minutes a day actually learning how to use AI for writing, planning, brainstorming, the real work. That's it, just one skill a day. This is the 28-day AI challenge built for beginners over 40. Starts tomorrow. Tap the screen to join us and try.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here. When something becomes part of the past, can it ever truly be experienced again? Obviously, my beard will grow back, but it won't be the same beard, and it won't be on the same person. It will be on a slightly older, different Michael. But of course, the bearded Michael of the past isn't completely gone. No, he still exists in our minds as a memory, and in the form of records of the past, like images and video. Hi, I'm the slightly older, different Michael you've heard about. I am 130 days older than that guy. Wow, 130 days. You know, it really doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Just as an optical illusion is a distortion of our sense of sight, a temporal illusion is a distortion of our sense of time. Some seem small, like how a minute spent waiting in line can seem to take forever, but an entire day with friends can just fly by. Some seem deeper, like the uncanny feeling we get from recordings that make people from long ago seem more real than usual. Or the strange way time seems to sneak by. For example, the songs I liked as a kid, Wannabe, MMMBop, Semi-Charmed Life, are as old to kids born today as the literal oldies were when I was born. How can that be true? Am I really that old now? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I know how time works, but yet, I don't. Far from being just mistakes, these illusions are the edges of another dimension of space-time. Not one given to us by physics, not one given at all, but one made by our minds. Let's begin with the different ways there are to feel time. Actually sitting down and consciously tuning into the passage of time as it happens is called feeling time prospectively. You can't do that to time that's already happened, except you can. If I were to ask you, without looking, to guess how long you have been watching this video, you'd probably be able to come up with a guess you were reasonably confident in. Well, you arrived at that guess by feeling time retrospectively, by measuring it as it appears in your memory. Now, with that in mind, we are ready to approach our first illusion, the holiday paradox. A 4-hour delay at the airport before your holiday can feel unbearably long while it's happening. But once you arrive, an exciting day at your destination can seem to fly by. Those feelings are all prospective timing. A week later, retrospectively, the delay often feels like a blip in your mind, and the day of sightseeing feels like a much longer, bigger part of your life. These are the long-short and short-long patterns of felt time. Which one you feel depends on whether what you are doing is empty or full. An empty activity is monotonous, unstimulating, unimportant to you, whereas a full activity is packed with sensations, novelty, significance, context change, and challenge. Now, I experienced this during my 3 days in isolation. While I was there, time dragged very, very slowly.
JT here, nigga, you almost just got me killed.
And that there's still a lot of time left.
But now, years later, it's hard to believe that I spent 3 full days in that room? Jesus, seems like something I barely did. Well, it's believed that prospective time feels fast when an activity is full because you're not busy thinking about time. If you're not attending to it, you're busy with something else, well, you won't notice how much time has passed. But to understand retrospective illusions, let's ask a different question. Does time speed up as we get older? Many of you may feel the same way. Looking back, my childhood feels like it lasted so long. But my 20s went by faster, and my 30s are going by even faster than that.
YouTube has just paid for my entire trip around Europe, it paid for this new car, and it even paid for this new house for my parents. And yeah, I don't work for YouTube. I don't create any videos. Instead, I work with YouTube. I run 3 Simple Faces channels, and all I do is publish ready-to-go videos that other people online create for me. That way, I don't have to create, record, or edit any videos myself, and I don't even have to show my face. This takes all the heavy lifting off my shoulders. So all I'm left with is publishing these videos and collecting the monthly paychecks. And next, in return, I just pay these people a small fee back once the video has made me some money. And because of this, there's no limit to how much I can make, because it's only up to me how many channels I want to have and how many videos I want to publish. More videos simply means more money. YouTube has already helped over 390,000 people from all over the world replace their full-time income, travel the world, and make some extra cash so they can actually enjoy life. I've also revealed the system to more than 1,300 of my students who got similar results, and now it's your turn. Now, before I show you how to use this system to get similar results, make some extra cash, or maybe even replace your 9-to-5 with something better, let's first answer the question that's probably on your mind. How much money can you actually make? Well, you're probably not gonna like the answer because the truth is everyone is different. So I'm not gonna be here promising that you're gonna get the same results as me. And that's why I spent the last few months working on this quiz. It's a 30-second quiz that'll show you how much you could actually make, if this is something you can do, and eventually how to find the right profitable channel idea for you, just like the profitable channel ideas that I've launched. So click the button somewhere on the screen, fill out the quiz, and I'll see you later.
Oh my fucking god! Oh, yeah. That's right. Hey! Let's go! That's my track.
I think what I've seen is people be more excited about it from a professional standpoint, because a lot of times that's the hardest barrier, is like when you're professional, to take a thing that you think is a novelty, or you've seen been a novelty, and apply it, to your work. But when I started really getting addicted to it, I was going, oh man, whatever I need is really right here. Like, I can prompt whatever I want. So if I need if I need the band to shout, if I need the choir, if I need a female rock vocalist, if I need a male pop vocalist, or R&B vocalist, or Afrobeat vocalist, I started being like, wow. And so all of my demos I started to make after I write my songs, they would come out like the song should sound. And that's when I was like, okay, this is dope. It even brought out the soul of it more. because it started with me asking it to do that, right? So it's like anything else. It's gonna exaggerate whatever you ask for. It's gonna try to make it better than what you asked for. It's not taking away, it's adding to. Like, and if you can play, still play. If you wanna go take classical piano, take it. If you wanna, be an opera singer, be an opera singer. So it's not ever gonna take away from anything. It's just giving you opportunities of ways to do things better, which is the same thing that Pro Tools did, which is the same thing Logic did.
The beauty of Suno too is that the creation is so vast, it rarely does the same thing twice. So that's how it's like you almost can't stop it. So you even said earlier how you'll take a voice and then you'll do it again and it's close. Close does not mean the same. So now you got two different situations. So if he do a song called Love You, I do a song called Love You, but because it'll...
A popular explanation is the proportion theory. It suggests that time seems to speed up as we age because each new unit of time that we live is smaller relative to all the time that came before. The year you lived as a 9-year-old was 10% of your entire existence up to that point. But when you're 30, another year is just 3% more life. Studies have found little evidence that weeks, months, or even years are retrospectively remembered as passing faster by those who are older. But decades? Yes. And while it's true that the older we get, the faster we tend to think the last 10 years went by, that only appears to be the case until about the age of 50. After that, the speed of decades appears to plateau. A leading explanation is that how long a duration feels depends on how many things in it can be recalled. In my normal life, lots of different things happen every 3 days. But during the 3 days I was in isolation, so little happened that I have few distinct memories from it. My mind sees that emptiness and perceives that it was brief. So, perhaps a decline in new experiences and rapid novelty as we age means fewer events our brains decide to commit to memory. So then, looking back, because there are fewer distinct memories from more recent decades, we assume they were shorter. Reflecting on all of this, it's striking just how many moments are forgettable. John Koenig, the author of the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, calls the awareness of how few days are memorable Olika. Over time, our specific daily perceptions of what happened conglomerate into generalized ideas about how things were. Themes, moods, the big picture. What was perceptual becomes conceptual. And concepts are good. They lower cognitive load by wringing out details, leaving us with the broader, lighter gist. But they can also obscure reality, which brings us to our second distortion, chronological illusions. The world of our experience is not made of distinct entities. It's a continuity of fuzzy, overlapping blobs, and we impose concepts on it. For example, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is cereal soup? How many holes does a straw have? Those aren't questions about reality, they're questions about words we made up. Periodization is the chopping up of time into contrived pieces like the Stone Age, the Renaissance, the 80s, the 90s. But here's the thing. When did the 80s or 90s really happen? I mean, mathematically, they refer to years that have 8s or 9s in the tens place. But conceptually? Well, it's not like on January 1st, 1980, people woke up and were like, whoa, 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 guys, it's the 80s, quick, everyone, change your clothes. Concepts say too much and too little. Facts that expose their imperfections are perennial favorites on social media. I made an entire video about them, in fact. But what hasn't been discussed yet is the mechanisms by which we allow them to do their dirty work. Let's dig in and see what we can find. If I asked you to lay down on the floor of a windowless, clockless room and get up after you thought a minute had passed, you'd probably do a pretty good job. But if I asked you to get up after you thought 10 years had passed, that'd be hard. We lack an ability to sense and grasp long periods of time. Also, we can't remember everything that happens. So instead of comprehending history's correct scale and structure, I believe that our minds often just use how we think about past events to place them relative to each other in time. One way we do this is through what I call the conceptual comparison heuristic, a technique whereby we use the similarity of elements in our conceptions of things to judge their temporal distance. If our concepts of two things suggest wildly different times, it's natural to assume that a lot of things happened between them. And if a lot happened, the duration separating them must be large. Alternatively, if our concepts aren't too different, the time between them must be bare of events, and so it feels brief. It's not a bad strategy, but tyrannosaurs died out 66 million years ago, and when T-Rexes began roaming the Earth, stegosaurs had already been extinct for more than 80 million years. To a T-Rex, the Stegosaurus was even more ancient than we think T-Rexes are. Here's another example. When we think of Marilyn Monroe, we think of a young woman, old Hollywood, mid-century glamour, Americana, black and white. When we think of the Queen of England, we think of an old woman in color in England and news headlines. Because those conceptions are quite different, we mentally place each woman in a different time, so it can come as a surprise to learn that they were both born in the same year. Similarly, it can be surprising to learn that Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were also born in the same year. And if they were alive today, they would both be younger than the Queen of England. When
I don't care what you're doing, you need to stop and listen to this interview.
This interview left me speechless. It's bigger than natural selection and the theory of relativity.
I'm completely shocked after watching this interview to see a scientist finally explain the human condition and fix the world. It's utterly astonishing.
I am stunned and honored to be alive to see the coming of Darwin Mark II in this interview.
I believe this is the most sensational information to ever appear on planet Earth.
Very recently I've been introduced to doing radio. It's led me on a little bit of a journey to do a series of interviews with people who are really trying to make a difference. So it gives me a great privilege to introduce Australian biologist Jeremy Griffith. He's the author of a book titled Freedom: The End of the Human Condition. This is my copy, and I take it everywhere with me. And there are millions of people all over the globe who are currently studying, reading, and researching through this book. He has also impressed Professor Harry Prosen, one of the world's leading psychiatrists. And he said, I quote, "I have no doubt that Jeremy Griffith's biological explanation of the human condition is the holy grail of insight we have sought for the psychological rehabilitation of the human race." Now, I think everyone listening would agree that the psychological rehabilitation of the human race is exactly what this world needs. So, buckle into your seats. This is going to be the most interesting and exciting talk you have ever heard.
Came across Jeremy's the interview, and I decided to listen, and it just blew me away.
I stumbled on the interview of Australian biologist Jeremy Griffith. Jeremy's interview was amazing and astonishingly insightful, as all the missing pieces of the great jigsaw puzzle of human nature fall into their proper places.
I stumbled upon this interview and I was like mesmerized.
The clarity of understanding that this gives is absolutely brilliant.
Jeremy Griffith's explanation for the human condition is key to ending all the suffering in the world.
Jeremy Griffith is an extraordinary biologist with such clear thinking in finding out who we are and what we are and why we are here. And my questions have all been answered.
Jeremy explains it so holistically, and he credits some of the most honest, profound thinkers in human history, gets to the bottom of every single topic that has perplexed mankind for so long. Things like the difference between men and women and the difference between races.
This has changed the way I see people. I now understand why they are like it. It's transformed my second marriage. I understand how he ticks and how men tick and why.
There's such an impoverishment of spirit now prevailing really globally. And I think the reconciliation of the intellect and the heart and the soul and the imagination and, of the human heart, mind, soul struggling to make sense of its life world. And now with Jeremy Griffith's work, we can make sense of the life world, which is, well, hallelujah, hallelujah.
That dude's.
When Harriet Tubman was born, Thomas Jefferson was alive, and when she died, Ronald Reagan was alive. This is surprising to many of us because our concepts of these people are anchored to them as adults. But Harriet Tubman was a 4-year-old when Thomas Jefferson died, and when she died, Ronald Reagan was a 2-year-old. Far from just being amusing, chronological illusions can often have teeth. America can feel like an idea fixed long before any of us by the overwhelming bulk of events that came before. But Barbara Walters has been alive for more than a third of America's entire history. And if you are 25, you have already lived through and been a part of more than 10% of America's history. Chronological illusions may also be caused by what I call the construal level heuristic, a technique whereby we place things in time based on whether we construe them concretely or abstractly. In social psychology, construal level theory describes how abstract and concrete thinking relate to psychological distance. That is, how distant something seems as opposed to how distant it actually is. Now, unsurprisingly, it's been found that people tend to think about things that are psychologically distant more abstractly. But studies have also found that if people are asked to think about an event abstractly, they'll consider it more distant than if asked to construe it concretely. This may explain why things can turn out to be longer ago or more recent than we thought. If an event recedes especially quickly from relevance or is suddenly replaced in our daily thoughts by other more urgent events unconnected to it, our minds may shift its construal to a higher level, making it feel further back in time than it really is. Conversely, if attending to the low-level details of an event continues to be important, our construal level heuristic will make it feel closer in time than it really is. Our third illusion of time comes from the fact that time is always moving forward. Because of that, the psychological distances we feel towards things should also always be changing. But not all of them do. The belief that your place in time is stable is what I call the chronostatic illusion. Tim Urban pointed out that it is now the case that Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, The Lion King were all released closer to the moon landing than today. As a person who remembers The Lion King being brand new and remembers feeling at that time that the moon landing was old, this is all very weird. The Lion King seems so much more recent than the moon landing ever did to me.
Hey guys, did you know some drivers are ditching their car insurance and they're doing this instead? Now, the reason why you may be overpaying for car insurance is because a big chunk of your monthly payment isn't even for insurance. It's to pay bill collectors and administrative people. Crazy, right? But my friend showed me this cool little website that changes this around completely. It gives you the ability to pay for just your policy alone. So this website can find liability for as low as $29 a month and full coverage insurance for only $38 a month. I put a link to the website down below. So hey, whatever button you see on this video, just go ahead and click that, and it's going to take you directly to the website.
The conceptual comparison heuristic places them far apart. My concept of the 90s will probably always stray from my concept of the present a little less than it should, because the 90s and now have something in common that the 90s and the 60s never did or will: me. Also, my construal level of The Lion King may resist becoming abstract, because The Lion King continues to evolve and happen. The mechanisms I use to place things in time have sunk hooks into The Lion King, creating a sort of chronostatic cling that fools me into believing it's more near. The music that was new when I was young has also been tethered in my mind to the idea of new stuff only us kids get, even as it has actually been drifting away, as far away as the stuff I used to think was far. A chronostatic illusion is spectacularly broken when you realize that you have become as old as your parents were when you were born. It doesn't always seem quite right. They came first, and as such, should always be older, but suddenly you're aware of a way in which they aren't. Your age gap with people in the past is not static. Your parents keep getting older right along with you, but the people they were don't. This can lead to empathetic realizations. They weren't any wiser or more folded into the world then than you are now. Considering the temporal perspectives of other people leads us to a fourth distortion: the chronocentric illusion. The belief that our own relationship to time is the best or only frame of reference, or that it's more important and more real than any other. My grandparents used to tell me about how when they were kids, they didn't have television. And I always thought that sounded so weird. I mean, obviously, I knew it was true, but like, what the heck did they do with their free time? It wasn't relatable at all. People back then must have been so different, not real in the same way I was. But I remember a time before the internet, before mobile phones, and it wasn't that weird. The internet and cell phones are still, in my mind, an additional thing we now have. But for my daughter, they will be what we've always had. And when I tell her about a time when no one had the internet and didn't even know they needed it, it will likely sound to her just like the old stories I heard about growing up with no TV. And that's bizarre. My grandparents' childhood was weird. It was the olden days. Mine was totally normal. Protagonist syndrome is the belief that you are the main character of the universe. Recognizing that you aren't is what John Koenig famously called Sonder, the realization that other people, like that stranger over there you will never see again, have full lives, just as important and consuming to them as yours is to you. I'd like to add to protagonist syndrome the concept of ab ovo syndrome. Ab ovo means from the egg, from the very beginning. In literature, it describes a story that begins at the start, ab ovo, as opposed to in the middle, in medias res. Ab ovo syndrome is the belief that the movie of the universe began when you began, that the times of your life are the plot and contain the climax, and that everything before you was just backstory, everything after merely sequels. When you realize that that's not true, that you were not born ab ovo, but in medias res, that you'll die before the credits, and that everyone who has ever lived was a fully fleshed out protagonist in their own minds, that feeling is what I call chronosonder. Sonder not just for people over there, but for people over then. Overcoming the chronocentric illusion isn't always easy. It doesn't help that people from the past are finished. Unlike us who still have choices to make, they tell the same story over and over again. They're also separated by barriers made of their own evidence. The world wasn't actually black and white in the past, and it didn't suddenly become vertical in the present. Obviously, we all know that. But the arbitrary technical properties of a time's recording media can influence our perception of the past nonetheless. If silent films didn't look so much different from what could be done just a few decades later, would it be nearly as surprising to learn that Charlie Chaplin lived long enough to watch Star Wars? When I was in high school, I saw 2001's Pipe Dream for the first time, and it blew my mind. My friends and I honestly believed that it was a real thing someone had built. But recently, I looked it up on YouTube, and I was like, this is clearly a computer animation. What the heck was wrong with us? And what do you know? The top comment was exactly that sentiment. Our perception of the past is constantly evolving as technology does. And that's significant. We don't just think about the past, we also think about the past. The material properties of an artifact can influence our relationship with what came before and push it further away.
The new iPhone 17 Pro?
And she said she didn't want anything.
Well, getting AT&T's best deal helped.
Good call.
Get the all-new iPhone 17 Pro on us. The most powerful iPhone yet. Most expensive plan not required.
It was my idea.
Faded yellowy color, sepia, SD pixelated video. Technological features can make the past seem like it was never as real as the present. But some kinds of evidence collapse that chronocentric divide. One way they can do it right now is by being demotic, ordinary, personal, candid. Such recordings are much more similar to the media we exchange with each other right now in the present. This footage of people goofing around in a 7-Eleven in 1987 has more than 6 million views, not just because of nostalgia, but because it's like visiting past people in their natural habitat at a time zoo. This isn't some pageant with timeless ambitions. It's a view out the window of a time machine they don't know is there. Another way evidence can corrode chronocentric illusions is by containing a convention more normal than we expect. People in old photos look like serious robots because back then you had to stay in the same pose for a long time to get a picture taken. But also, a long-standing trope in the world of images up to that point was that smiling or looking goofy wasn't a sign of happiness, but of drunkenness or stupidity. But every so often, this image pops up online and people vehemently debate whether it's actually old or not. Sure, it's black and white, but the expression seems too normal to really be on a person from the past. It is, however, actually an honest-to-gosh picture taken in the early 1900s, one of the earliest known photographs of a human smiling, in fact. The juxtaposition of an expression someone today might make with a medium that suggests a technology of the past creates an opportunity for chronosonder. The subject is both dead and undead, gone, but not as unrelatably far as we may have thought the past was. Finally, the chronocentric divide can fade when we find the past captured in a medium that was rare at the time but more common now. This is footage taken by an early HD camera of New York City in 1993. It's pretty cool, but there's something almost uncanny about it. Watching it isn't exactly like time traveling back to 1993, but it looks more like video taken today than many of us expect. It's like peering through a telescope. We can see them, but they can't see us. They appear closer, more actual than usual. We lean in to get grasps of what it was like. That's part of the allure of time travel. As L.P. Hartley said, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. But it hasn't always been that way. Time travel wasn't a common feature of fiction until the 19th century. not because people hadn't thought of it before, they had, but the past and future weren't rich with interesting destinations in the same way they are to us now. In the year 1008, it wasn't an insult to call someone 1000 and late. 1,000 years ago, the culture and technology around you was unlikely to be foreign to your parents, or grandparents, or great-grandparents, and outside of an act of God or gods, you didn't expect them to be foreign to your children or their children either. 1,000 years ago, there were no 80s parties, because the 980s weren't interestingly different. Pre-modern societies viewed the present as a continuation of the past. Changes were interpreted as temporary disturbances of the natural state. But today, we see the present as something special. Change is significant enough and rapid enough now that we would imagine ourselves quite differently had we been born 10 years earlier or later. Zachary Sayre Schiffman points out, we fail to realize that people before the 18th century did not see themselves this way. Instead of having a history, they regarded themselves as having an unchanging nature or essence, whose full realization might be impeded or impelled, but not otherwise shaped by events. Nostalgia existed, but for moments and places gone simply because they were prior to or away from here and now, not because they were fundamentally different and categorically irretrievable. As the discovery of antiquities and new worlds and new species accelerated, as the invention of new technologies and new ways of recording accelerated, the present became less and less like the past. Reinhard Koselleck has argued that between 1750 and 1850, the acceleration of history reached a speed at which static or cyclical views of time had to be replaced with our modern view, which understands the past to be essentially different from the present. It used to be that things passed. Now, there is a past. As technological and social change accelerate, the window of time within which things can be trusted to remain stable shrinks. In such a world, to stand still is scary. Hartmut Rosa observed, the pre-modern experience of being excluded is replaced in modernity by the constantly present, fear-inducing possibility of becoming excluded, in the sense of getting left behind. Things change faster, and we keep keeping up because we are afraid to die. Whoever lives twice as fast can realize twice as many worldly possibilities, and thus, as it were, live two lives in the span of one. Whoever becomes infinitely fast no longer needs to fear death, the annihilator of options. Acceleration becomes a secular substitute for eternity. To achieve this salvation, we try to make things faster and easier to save time. But one of the greatest hoodwinks we ever pulled on ourselves was not noticing that the things we do to save time leave us with less of it and more alone in it. No technological change is only technological. The car allowed people to travel more quickly and whenever they wanted, but once available, it meant people could live further from where they worked. So cities and towns changed, personal associations changed, roads divided neighborhoods, created new opportunities, while ending others. Jobs and industries and cultural forms of expression and a whole different society sprang into existence simply because we found a way to move faster. Likewise, smartphones and the internet made information access and communication easier and faster, but that's not all they did. Along with them came new social conventions, new communities, new levels of exposure to ideas and conflict, a new understanding of what it meant to be available. That's a lot to have to adapt to. They even redefined what now is made of. Digital spaces are filled with not just what's being said, but also what has been said. And it's all right there, not tucked into a library across town or on a tiny plaque on a statue covered in bird poop.